Hello, and welcome to the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. This podcast is designed to provide that momentum in our God-given roles of leadership as we partner together to equip today's Christian leaders for tomorrow's opportunities. Thank you so much, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. My name is Eric, and I will be your host for today's conversation. I have with me Josiah Bogue.
What up, everybody?
How's it going, Josiah?
It's good to see you. I'm glad to talk to the king, Eric Miller.
Dude, I'm not
today.
the king. I'm not the king. I'm fighting a cold, so I'm just gonna apologize right now to our listeners. My voice will not be as velvety smooth as it normally is.
A little less king-like today.
A little less. Oh, man. Josiah, it's good to have you back on the podcast again. I think we had you season 1. You were a guest.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
You're back again, man.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. That means you didn't suck. You did a good job.
Or that's how many people declined for today. That's how bottom of the food chain we are right now.
Oh, man. We're scraping the bottom of the barrel. No, actually, I'm super excited to have you on today because of your involvement with Momentum Youth Conference.
Yes.
So, Josiah, many of you know Josiah as one of the band leaders from the Momentum Youth Conference band through On the Road and then through this last year, 2022.
Yep.
Josiah's going to be back for Momentum 2023.
Yes, third year strong.
Best week of the summer.
Best week of summer.
I can't wait, dude. I'm so stinking excited about it.
Me too.
Thank you for coming back. We're super excited to have you and just your energy. I love watching you bounce around on the stage because your energy is like hands down to none. Like yours is the best. So
good.
I love it. We're gonna get you some dance lessons actually before.
I would love that. My sister, we played this gig one time at my sister's school, and she came up and she's like, Josiah, can you please not do the normal thing? She's like, all my friends are making fun of you. You're really embarrassing me.
I love it. And the reality is, we don't care.
Yeah.
You probably don't really care.
No, I really don't. Like, Naomi, believe it or not, your high school friends are not really who I'm out to impress these days.
Exactly. You're like, I'm married. I'm good.
I
actually don't care. Yeah. Did Jesus show up in that space? Yes. Cool. Well, then we're good.
We're good.
Oh, it's so fun. I love it. A couple years ago, actually at youth conference, they brought like all the staff out. At the end, like the final night.
I remember that.
And like me and like 2 other people were like, we actually don't dance. We really feel uncomfortable trying to dance. But everybody else is like going crazy and like just jumping around and having a good old time. And I looked at like my 2 friends. I was like, I just am so glad that you're standing here awkwardly with me on the side, not dancing.
You just gotta jump and clap. I wouldn't even call it dancing. What I do, I just call it rhythmic moving.
There you go. Just jump up and down.
Yeah, it's just kind of got beat to it, you know.
Yeah. Well, we're excited. We're excited about youth conference this summer for sure. It really is the best week of summer. We're starting to like lock in speakers, and that's been fun. We rolled out our theme, which is known, and we're going to talk about the theme on today's episode today. So,
do you guys? You guys speakers?
We do have speakers. We have speakers lined up.
Can you? They don't tell me what's happening. Can you is there like a
You're asking me for a teaser here.
Is there is there a speaker that hasn't been announced or something like that?
There's actually a lot of speakers that have not been announced yet. We're slowly if you don't follow us on Instagram, go check out our Instagram.
That's a great plug, but just give me one, Eric.
There's this guy named Jeff Bogue.
Come on, give me.
Who's coming?
Give me an interesting one.
All right. So one that I'm actually really, really excited about. Corbin Hogue is coming back.
Yes.
From last year. He kicked off the week last year.
He did a great job.
Corbin's coming back. So that's one. But I'll go one step further, and I'll tease this. This is just only people who listen to this podcast episode will know of this person.
And me
and you. And so I guess whoever you
I'm going to just
decide
start
to tell.
tweeting inside Momentum information.
There you go. But we're bringing in a guy named Mark Clark.
Is
do you know him?
Yes. Wait, there's a book. What is that? There's an apologetics book he has.
Yeah.
What is that book?
He's kind of big in the apologetics realm. He actually started a church up in Canada that called the Village Church, and it took off and grew like crazy. He's now a teaching pastor in LA or in California, I guess. But Mark has a crazy story. I think it's hilarious because like I teased our team. I'm like, he looks like he walked out of like a Banana Republic magazine.
Oh, really?
But he sounds like Liam Neeson. His like voice is
That's
like
awesome.
I'm gonna like he's just it doesn't connect because I listened to his podcast for a while and I'm just super excited about Mark.
That's really I actually like I listen to Mark Clark.
Yeah,
like, that's really cool,
dude. I'm pretty stoked about him coming.
You got Jeff Bogue, Corbin, and Mark Clark.
Those are the three.
Those are really
and
exciting.
We've already announced on our Instagram that Tony Lavigny is coming back. So for all those,
you got all my favorite people,
the
man.
Tony truthers,
yeah, that's really great. That's really great.
I'm pumped. It really will be the best week of the summer.
Yeah.
But Josiah, we wanted to kind of tease out the theme, the topic for the week of youth conference. Our theme is known, KNOWN, known. How are we known? And Josiah, this plays in a lot into kind of your role because in addition to all things momentum and leading worship at youth conference, you're also the pastor of Grace Collective here in Akron. And so one of the things, Collective is the college ministry, right? For anybody.
Young adult, 18 to 28.
College and young adult. There you go.
Yep.
So one of the things that I thought it would be helpful is like I have friends that are my age, they're in their 40s and they're still like wrestling with their identity.
Yeah.
With being known by God and other people, right? That's probably one of our core, that's a core need, right? We want to be known. And what that means is we want to be loved and accepted.
Right.
So when you and I as husbands, as, pastors, as leaders, when we say we want to be known, what does that mean? Like flesh that out a little bit, help us like wrap our heads around like what does when people in our culture today say the word known, what do they really mean? What are they really asking for? Kind of start us off with that. Like, what do you see?
That's a complicated question because it's an identity question. So when I remember going through undergrad especially, and we were always taught like the core needs that everyone needs to know is one of them is what is my identity. Yeah. But it's really weird because you can't talking about identity is very ethereal. So people are like, I'm going out to tell everybody their identity,
right?
And like that's a very ethereal concept, and it's very hard to know what to attach that to or what people even mean by that. It is interesting though when you look throughout the Bible how the Bible parses out the identity question without really using that word too often. So like in the Old Testament, the very first thing, so God rescues the Israelites from Egypt. The very first thing he says is, have no other gods before me, and don't make an image or an idol that reflects anything else on earth. And so right off the bat, what God is saying is every person is going to have a tendency to turn to something else to parse out why they're here and what keeps them safe and what protects them and what gives them significance and all that kind of stuff. And so back in the day, you obviously build a statue of like Ashtoreth or I don't know. You'd build, you want to find your identity in your work. You'd build some kind of statue and that God would ask for rain or whatever.
Yeah.
It's interesting that as the Bible kind of progresses in that story, you get to the New Testament and a rich young ruler comes up to Jesus and says, Jesus, I have followed all the commands, so I don't have any idols this time. There's no statues in my house. All 10 commandments, I love other people, I go to church every week, all this kind of stuff. But I feel deep down inside that something is missing in my relationship with you. How do I know that I will be with you forever? How do I know that I'm known by God and God knows me? And Jesus says, you're right, actually. You do follow all the commands on the surface level, at least. You're well respected, you're a good guy, but you're really missing one thing, and it's probably the deepest thing. And he doesn't tell him what it is.
Right.
He just says, if you want to find the deepest thing, what you need to do is sell everything you have and give the money to the poor. And if you do that, you'll have treasures in heaven. And the man goes away, upset by this or sad by that. We don't know what he does. He could have done it. But he was sad because he
had great wealth. Yeah.
He had great wealth. He never imagined not being wealthy. And so you have this idea, in the Bible that we are latching ourselves onto other things for that meaning and for significance. For that guy, his idol or his identity or his meaning or what he wanted to be known for by or loved or accepted by was his wealth. And so the concept of living a enjoyable life, I think our culture would say a happy life, living a good life without wealth was an impossible concept in his mind. And so when Jesus says, actually, no other gods before me.
Right.
If you come to me, I'll show you who you are at the foundational level. And then we can build out what that means as far as like calling and purpose. Like we can parse out what that means as far as identity is concerned. But right now you want to be accepted and you want to be loved because of your wealth. And if you want to be closest to me, you need to come to me. I think when we're talking about known, what we're known by, who we're known by, I think it's really a conversation largely about the Bible word would be idolatry.
Right.
You know, how many eggs am I putting into what basket? And until we come to Jesus Christ and learn what it means to be known by him first, that there's always going to be a big question mark there.
So our theme verse for the week at youth conference is 1 John 4:16, and we're using the New Living Translation. It says this: we know how much God loves us, and we have put our trust in his love. So what you're talking about, this idolatry, I think if we're honest, and as human beings, if we're being authentic about it, like to actually say, I do know maybe on the surface how much God loves me. I believe all that. It's head knowledge, right?
Right.
But to put my trust in his love, like the rich young ruler, to actually believe that God would have my best. And even if I let go of my entire identity of being a rich young ruler, he's literally described as that in the context of Scripture. Like, that's his identity. That's who he is. That's the only thing he's ever known. For him to put his trust in that requires a whole different set of practices, application, principles, things that you're saying he's probably never thought through or wrestled with.
No. Yeah. Well, the theme verse is perfect. I didn't know the theme verse until just this moment.
So, nor did you know any of the speakers. I love
so much about momentum right now.
This is why we're having this conversation.
I figured
Josiah.
Jeff Bogue was going to speak at momentum.
Exactly.
That's what I knew. But
he was on the fence this year.
I'm very excited about that. Your theme verse is perfect because it talks about first knowing the love of God, and then letting the love of God change everything. So to be completely honest with you, this week in my life has been me wrestling with God about identity and what does that mean to walk in the Spirit. When I'm trying to help somebody figure out where their identity's at, one of the first things I try and help them figure out is let's identify what your actual idol is. Tim Keller has a great definition that I found really helpful. He's like, your idol is whatever functionally drives your life. So what has the most control over your emotions? What has the most control over your time? What has the most control over your money? What do you think about the most often? That you can
love that.
Call it whatever you want, but that's your God. Like that's the thing that you functionally want to be accepted by the most or want to have the most in order to be accepted. But once you identify that idol, then your temptation is like, I'm going to try really hard to get rid of this idol. And that's what I find in my own life. So if I have idols in my life, it's productivity, it's growing a ministry at a very rapid rate. It's kind of proving myself. And so I have that idol identified, but now my temptation is just like, okay, so that's my idol. I need to Sabbath more. I need to rest more. Or that's my idol, and so I need to read the Bible more. Or this is like a real one for me. That's my idol. I need to pull over to homeless people on the street more often. And but the reality is, if you want to displace an idol in your life, it needs to be replaced with something else. The only way to like overthrow an idol is to to accept the overwhelming love of something else. And so that what John's saying is hey, if you receive that you are loved, that you are known, that you are accepted where you're at right now. And you stop trying for a second, and you stop exploring for a second, and you let the reality that Jesus loves you, that he fought for you, that he's won for you, that he wants to be with you, when you let that reality sink into your life, and as you ask God to let that reality sink into your life, that love will displace the love for everything else, and that's really what John's saying.
So good. Yeah. Part of how our team even kind of came to this idea of this theme, and kind of like as we were wrestling it through, and I was thinking and praying, I'm like, man, like I want these students to know that they're known and loved by God.
Right.
And sometimes in our world today, those are two different things.
Very.
And so like for us, like we tend to portray ourselves in this certain way. Because we think that will get us love and acceptance. Right. Well, I'm only going to post on my social media the highlight reels so that people will think that that's who I actually am. And then they'll love and accept me.
Right.
Which is very backwards thinking. And yet to be known in your innermost weakness, to be known by someone where they see your flaws, they know your dirty laundry, like they've seen you at your worst, and yet they still accept you and love you.
Right.
That's a game changer.
Right.
We all, in theory, I think we're created to be in relationship. We're created by God to be in right relationship with him. That's what he longs for. That's what he created us for.
Right.
And yet we know scripturally our sin separates us from God.
Right.
Because he's holy and he's just. And yet he made a way. Like there's great news. And so to step into that right relationship, allowing God to help us identify those idols, what are the things that hinder us, that keep us from him? So the week of youth conference, we're actually going to just kind of work through this whole passage of 1 John 4. Now, we're asking each different speaker to kind of take an aspect of chapter 4. On paper, it looks wonderful. Who knows how it will actually play out?
Dude,
you should come to youth conference. Bring your group. Come to youth conference. We'll see how it plays out. But that's kind of the goal, is to work this through.
I think that's so good. The reason I love youth conference so much is I love students. That's where I found Jesus was actually at Momentum, which is so awesome.
I hear that a lot, actually.
It's crazy. It's such a full circle thing. And now I've taken that into the collective young adult ministry. And it's funny because so now I work mostly with that age group. And the anxiety rates are through the roof. The depression rates are through the roof. There was a loneliness survey that was taken a few years ago, and they found that the young adult age group it was either the second or the first loneliest age group.
Wow.
Out there. And what's funny is I think a lot of the advice that people get is if you want to be known, you need to put yourself out there. Right. Is you don't have any friends, go make friends. You don't especially for young adults, it's you want to find love, go, meet people and that advice is good advice. That is true advice. It's functional, practical advice. But I think we have to be a little more empathetic sometimes in realizing the reason someone is cautious of putting themselves out there is because they probably have at some point. They've probably invited someone into the deepest parts of their life, and that person did something evil with it.
Yep.
And so they had a friend and they revealed that secret, and that friend spread that secret. They had parents that they trusted to take care of them. Those parents did not take care of them. Right. They had a boyfriend, maybe there was abuse, sexual abuse, whatever. And so the promise of being known by Jesus is the game-changing promise, no matter what your age is. Because what Jesus is saying is, you invite me into the deepest, most fragile parts of your life. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to manipulate you. I'm not going to abuse you. I am gentle. I am patient. And I will love you and accept you with the worst baggage that anyone could have. And those typically in the Bible, when you read the Bible, those are the people that flock to Jesus the most. The people with the worst baggage. The sexual abuse victims had the worst baggage.
Yep.
People with the worst emotional, mental health had the worst baggage. People with the worst upbringings, most rejection. And so that's what I'm excited about this conference, because if someone can first learn how to let Jesus in and deal with the fragile parts of our lives, and then as Jesus heals that, they'll also learn how to trust other people.
Right.
And when you know that you're known and loved, it's easier to put yourself out there. When you don't know that you're known and loved, you're terrified of it.
Correct. So Josiah, let's dig a little deeper in that.
Yeah.
Because I think what you're saying is foundational. Like that aspect of having a confidence, having a security, understanding who I am in right relationship with Jesus, that then affords me to be, now I can be vulnerable with other people and actually not care. Right. Even though maybe I've got betrayed, even though maybe I was hurt in the past, even though like it didn't go well before, which I love what you're saying, like that empathetic side. Because sometimes for students, middle and high school students, especially as they're learning how to build relationships with people, probably everybody's had that happen.
Yeah.
And
sure.
and so you're right. Like the right practice is put yourself out there. You got to like make an effort. But the reality is like maybe they did and that went very poorly. And so now you're afraid and like that's real. But if you understand like, man, I'm confident in my relationship with Christ and that's what matters. That's the most important thing rather than to go back to the idol. Right. Like for many of us, our idols or the things that we're like excited about or put all of our time, energy, thought process, resources into is our friendships.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, I need a girlfriend and I need, or I need to be this way in order to get a girlfriend. And so then that means I need to look and dress a certain way. I need to be these friends with these people. And it plays into all those things. And we skip the step like, I'm secure in my relationship with Christ, first and foremost.
It's like you watch Monsters, Inc.?
Yeah, dude.
You know the laugh tanks, like when the laugh gets filled all the way up? I think when someone comes to Jesus and really understands what the gospel, what the good news means, that I'm fully loved. I love the opening line of the one song, the Jireh. I'll never be more loved than I am right now. You know? When you realize that your acceptance gauge is all the way full, your love gauge is all the way full, you're clean in the eyes of God. That's all the way full. Then if someone else accepts you, that's icing on the cake. The problem is most of us, those tanks are empty or they're most of the way empty. And so now you're dependent on other people accepting you.
Right.
And now when they reject you, it's 10 times more brutal. And that's why I was telling my wife this the other day. I'm like, this past week, I have been taking criticism very, very personally. This week, it's very abnormal for me to do that. And I was telling her the other day, I said, I think it's because my confidence in Jesus' love for me is lower right at the moment. And I have to ask the Spirit of God to help me. I can't like just start doing more devotionals and have that problem fixed, like Fix It Felix or something. But it is an indicator of I'm taking this personally because I'm looking for the approval of men. That's why Paul is saying that all over the place. He's like, why are you looking for the approval of men? You have the approval of God.
Yep. That's so good. That's really good. Josiah, let's kind of, for our listeners who might be listening to this and they're like a parent, maybe a pastor, there's somebody that works with students and they're thinking of the student. I think as leaders, we're often so good at like, oh yeah, so-and-so needs this. This student in my youth group needs this. I need this.
There you go.
Let's go a little
I
bit.
need this.
You need this. I need this. Yeah,
absolutely.
Because that's the reality. Like this actually affects us all.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I love about our youth conference and what we aim to do is not only do we want to reach the students with this, but like every year without fail, there are volunteers, there's adult leaders, there's people who are the adults who are there that are like, oh my word, I needed that reminder.
Dude, 1,000%.
And like, if I'm honest with you, Josiah, like since I stepped out of like actively pastoring at a church and stepped into this role, being whatever my title is, the ministry director at Momentum, like
the king of Momentum.
That and can get me all choked up here. that was hard because it's like, hang on, like now I'm not like, it took me like a good 6 months, maybe a year of like, okay, wait, am I a pastor? And I had to really wrestle with like, that had become my identity.
Oh, the title.
Yeah. And the stupid thing is like, my wife is, I always say my wife, the voice of the Holy Spirit often sounds a lot like my wife because he uses her a lot to speak truth to me. But she would just continually like, you're still a pastor. You don't actually have to like be on staff at a church. That's a job description, not who you are. You're a shepherd by nature. That's the definition of a pastor. And so like for me to honestly to wrestle that through and come to the realization of like, okay, I'm not actively on staff at a church as a pastor, but I am very much still a pastor.
Right.
You can't tell my brain not to think that way, because that's who God created me to be. That's the gifts, the abilities, the passions, desires that he's put inside of my heart. And that's real and that's there. And when I'm secure in my relationship with Christ and I see the opportunities that he gives me of the people that are all around, it changes the whole perspective. Then I'm like, oh my word, thank you, Lord. There's still people in my life that I get to influence for your kingdom.
Yeah.
Wow, I get to shepherd them. I get to pastor them. And so I'm like, that was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
And a difficult journey that I think all of us have to go through. And I love what you're saying of like, there are times where we receive criticism where we're trying to please people and not the Lord. And so I think these are big, big deals that we can't just like point the finger at, well, it's the students.
No, we always have to start with ourselves. And to be honest, I think that's, I have felt off track the past couple of weeks. And I think a lot of that has been me not looking at myself. I'm looking at the problems in my ministry. I'm looking at the problems in my friends. I'm looking at the problems in my family. And the problems in my house, all this kind of stuff. And the reality is if I want to lead towards the gospel needs to be real to me. If I'm not overwhelmed by the love and the acceptance of Jesus, and if this has become a routine thing for me, or if I'm only getting closer to Jesus just so I can get other people closer to Jesus,
right?
It's like, is that even good news anymore? Or am I just a salesman for something,
sure.
And that's what I love. Jesus just says so many great things. There's a story where the disciples run to Jesus and they're like, Jesus, we cast out demons. We did all this crazy stuff. And they listen to us.
Yeah.
They like, man, I'm a pastor, I'm a leader, I'm a whatever. And Jesus says, listen, don't be excited about that. Be excited that your names are written in the book of life. Be excited that you belong to me. That's what you get excited about. And when you're excited about that, then everything else kind of pours out. But we need God's help to get our hearts there. And that's where I'm always praying. I'm like, God, show me who you are. Get my heart there. I know that there's nothing I can do to get my heart in the right place. But I'm asking you to do that for me. And he honors that prayer.
That's so good. Yeah, Jesus kind of has a way of taking us back and like, hang on, I'm over here. I think of like Peter when the disciples are in the boat and the storms, which I love. I've done a study on this. Like you can look through the Gospels and see how Jesus uses storms, or i.e. trials and tests in our life, for the disciples, which many of them were fishermen, and they're like comfortable being in a boat.
They're supposed to be good at this.
Yeah, you're like, haven't you been in a storm before? Like, what's going on? And yet, like, Jesus uses those literal storms to teach them lessons. I'm like, oh my word, like he does the same thing for us.
For sure.
And so like when, Peter actually goes from like waking Jesus up when he's asleep in the boat and he's like, hey, aren't you going to do anything? We're going to drown. To then later, Jesus isn't even in the boat. He comes to them walking on the water.
Right.
And Peter steps up on the edge of the boat and he's like, I need to be where you are.
Right.
Which is way counterintuitive. Like no one's ever walked on water. And he's like, I don't care. Jesus is out there. And like, how cool is it that Jesus literally let him walk on water?
Let him walk.
Until he took his eyes off him. And so what you're saying, I think, is accurate. Like you're saying, and thank you for your vulnerability on that. Like I'm looking at all the problems and they're weighing me down and I'm drowning in them. I often, my perspective, I'll be real too. Like there's times where I look at all the problems and I'm like, how am I going to fix them?
Right.
I need to fix this rather than fix my eyes on Jesus. Give me wisdom, give me discernment. Like, and so for both ends of the spectrum, wherever you're at, whatever your circumstances are you looking at Jesus?
Well, and that's it. I love that story, and I love that you brought that up too, because my brain, my legalistic work performance-based brain is is like, all right, I hacked the system. If I keep my eyes on Jesus, I am going to succeed in everything. And so, but
it's still backwards.
But
right?
what happens is, it's beautiful. This story is beautiful because what happens? Peter inevitably takes his eyes off Jesus, and isn't that what we all do?
Yep.
And all of us are prone to say, well, if you take your eyes off of Jesus, you're going to sink, and that might be true. But when Peter starts sinking, what does Jesus do? He grabs his hand and picks him back up, and that's grace, and that's like.
Yep.
It's the grace of Jesus picks me up in my failure. That's the story that I want to be overwhelmed by.
Yes.
Not the story of if I just have enough faith. No,
Correct.
It's the story of Jesus picks me up when I don't have enough faith. And ironically, that's what gives me the faith to begin with.
Yes. Yes. So good. All right. So Josiah, let's kind of bottom line it. We're running out of time here. What's our real identity? And for those who are trying to just figure this out for themselves, give us like a practical tip of if you're like having light bulbs go on in your head as you're listening to this, you're wrestling with it and you're like, I actually don't know what my real identity is. I think I've made it about this or an idol or whatever. What encouragement would you give to our listeners to like start stepping out of that and finding out who you really are?
That's really good. First, I would say you have to identify your idol. You have to find the thing. What is the thing that functionally drives my life? What causes my emotion? What makes me happy? What makes me sad? What are these things? You have to identify that. But then second, your identity is Jesus Christ. If you belong to him, that's who you are. He has changed who you are. I love when Paul's like, in Christ, there is no Jew, no Gentile, no slave, no free, no male, no female. He's saying, listen, your racial identity needs to be subordinate to Jesus. Your gender identity needs to be subordinate to Jesus. Your socioeconomic identity, slave master, needs to be subordinate to Jesus. It's not to say that those things aren't realities, but it needs to start with Jesus Christ has rescued me from something that I could never rescue myself from. And if you really believe that, your identity won't be in performance. If you really believe that, your identity won't be in other people's acceptance. It will be in who Jesus is. You start there. And then you ask Jesus to kind of build up from it, because we're all different people. I think sometimes you hear this and the idea is that we're all going to be exactly, we're clone troopers, that we all have our identity. But you start with who Jesus is, and then Jesus starts revealing, this is who I made you to be specifically.
Yes.
And this is specifically what I've crafted you to do and how to act and function in the world.
Yep.
But when your source is him, then your failure in those areas doesn't change your value and your, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so you start with him, you come to him, and you let him build your way up. And if you're struggling with how to go about that, how to do that, you have to ask him for help. You have to replace your time with the idols with time with him, prayer and the scriptures. And then you have to just let him do in your life what he's going to do. Kind of take your hands off a little bit and let him build you up.
Yeah. Josiah, thank you. That's so good. Well, I'm excited for our students and for the churches and youth groups who will be joining Josiah and I.
If you have not signed up for youth conference, I am here to tell you right now, you need to sign up for youth conference. If you're a pastor and you haven't been promoting this to your youth group, you need to promote to your youth group. If you're a parent and you have a child and you're wondering if this investment is where I accepted Jesus Christ at Momentum Youth Conference. It's changed the life of me. It changed the life of all my friends.
It's fun.
It is so fun.
It's actually fun. So we've been wrestling with how do we promote this whole thing? To the youth pastor, every youth pastor wants that story.
Yeah.
But to the kids, they don't care. If they don't know
we're
Jesus,
gonna dance. We're gonna play games.
I'm
we're gonna have basketball tournaments.
I don't even know how to explain it. It literally is the best week of the summer. I don't care if your family went to the greatest vacation ever. This will probably still be better.
All of my best high school memories are at Momentum. I'm not butt kissing right now. I'm totally serious.
Yeah.
So this
it's so funny because people think well, of course, Eric, you're going to say that it's the best week.
I have no incentive for this.
And but that was me too.
Yeah.
I grew up going to it and my life is forever changed because of how God used it. Yep. It's not the conference itself. It's just how God works there. And so, Josiah, thank you for being a part of this and your role. And it's super fun to get to craft the week. And we're just, it's February and we're prayerful and excited about what's going to happen in and through this 1 week in July. So July, 18th through the 23rd, come on out. we're super excited about what God's going to do. So thank you, Josiah, for
Absolutely.
getting us riled up there. Yeah. Go register now. Yeah. If you have questions, let us know. Thank you. Dude, that was awesome.
Well, guys, I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. We'd be really honored if you went ahead and subscribe to the podcast, and that way you can just kind of stay up to date with the episodes that we're posting in the future. To learn more about Momentum Ministry Partners and our many other resources, please be sure to follow us on social media at Momentum Ministry Partners, or check out our website, www.buildmomentum.org.